A business-like blowout for the New York Mets in D.C. and another top prospect who could be ready to make his debut. Maybe the Mets are hitting their stride at the right time.
You are Locked On Mets, your daily New York Mets podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello to all you amazing Mets fans. You're watching Locked On Mets, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I'm your host, Ryan Finkelstein. I've covered the New York Mets on this show since the 2019 season. It's the only podcast covers the Mets 7 days a week throughout the regular season. Want to find some of my written work, you can do so over at justbaseball.com, where I work as the editor-in-chief. Today's episode is brought to you by GameTime. Download the GameTime app, create an account, use the code LOCKEDONMLB for $20 off your first purchase. Well, what a difference 72 hours makes for your New York Mets. 3 wins in a row. You have Nolan McLean make his debut on Saturday, pitched great, got this train rolling. Sunday, you win the Little League Classic. Monday, you go into the friendly confines of Nationals Park and you beat up on your division rival who has just been playing as bad of baseball as the Mets lately, but the talent discrepancy on the field today was pretty evident. And I spent all of yesterday's show talking about this starting rotation and how the Mets need to see their playoff rotation emerge, particularly in this series, but throughout the rest of this season. And that playoff rotation should be David Peterson, Kodai Senga, and Sean Manaea. And those are the guys that we're going to watch in these games. And David Peterson got the ball rolling. If you were worried about his last couple of starts, he eased that worry pretty quickly. If you remember, it was against the Nationals that David Peterson threw that complete game earlier this year, and he's just absolutely carved against this Nationals lineup again. He retired the side in order in the first 5 innings. First 5 innings. All he gave up was a hit that he erased with a double play ball. That was it. First inning, struck out James Wood, who was batting leadoff despite his recent struggles, and Paul DeJong. So 2 strikeouts in that first inning. Second inning gets 3 groundouts. The best one, Brett Baty made an awesome play. Short hop, backhand, ball flips up into the air off his glove as it deflects high in the sky. He reaches up, grabs it with his bare hand, running throw, fires to first base on the money. That was a really cool play by Baty, who continues to just play really good defense wherever you put him, but particularly at third base. Top of the 3rd inning, Peterson gets a lot of run support. Francisco Lindor, a 1-out double. Juan Soto draws a walk ahead of Brandon Nimmo, who gets an RBI single. After Pete Alonso pops out, Jeff McNeil picks him up with a 2-out double into the right field corner. And then Mark Vientos breaks the game open with a 2-run homer. That's the 2nd game in a row where Vientos has homered. Hopefully he's starting to come alive. Bottom of the 3rd inning, David Peterson gave up that hit and then got the double play ball to get out of it. 4th inning, once again against the top of the lineup, he strikes at the leadoff man in Wood and Paul DeJong, the 3-hole hitter. 5th inning, 1-2-3 frame with another strikeout. 6th inning, he gets a little more run support. Brett Baty, leadoff homer, his 14th of the season. Bottom of the frame, he works around a leadoff double, gets a strikeout, gives up another single. So you got 1 out, 2 runners in scoring position. He's able to pick up another strikeout against James Wood, just completely baffling the Nationals stud. Gets another fly out, strands 2 in scoring position. Top of the 7th, it's Soto, who hits a leadoff homer, his 31st of the season. Bottom of the 7th, another 1-2-3 inning with a couple more strikeouts. 8th inning, David Peterson strides to the mound at 80 pitches with a chance to maybe have another complete game. He gives up a leadoff triple. Then he walks a batter. So he's sitting with runners at 1st and 3rd. Huge lead, so no worry about pulling him from the game. And, of course, he gets another ground ball. Once again, it's Baty to McNeil to Alonso to turn the double play. And then he picks up his 10th strikeout to get out of the inning. So he gives up a run, but altogether 8 innings pitched, 4 hits, 1 walk, 10 strikeouts, got 18 whiffs on 43 swings. That's a whiff rate of 42% for David Peterson in this one. He was picking up whiffs all night, particularly with his changeup, 12 swings, 7 whiffs. The curveball looked really good. That he was just pounding the zone with his sinker, getting those ground balls, getting ahead of guys. it was a masterclass for David Peterson, who clearly doesn't fear anybody in that Nationals lineup. And when you get him against a second division team like that, he just has the ability to attack the zone and give you so much length. And now all of a sudden, this bullpen getting a lot of rest, which is great. Hopefully, you can get length out of Kodai Senga and Sean Manaea throughout the rest of this series to have a really well-rested pen for the weekend series against the Braves. And also, this is a stretch that the Mets just began where they're going to play 16 games in 16 days. So whenever you can get a night off for a lot of your guys because your starting pitcher goes deep, that's going to be huge for this team. They still haven't got another starting pitcher through 6 innings outside of David Peterson over the last couple of months. But once again, it's Peterson who does the job of getting a ton of outs for the Mets. So really great start for him. You can't talk about what he did enough because it really was just a really, really good outing for Peterson to remind you that he's all right. He's going to have his blips in the radar, but he's definitely an arm you trust right now. Jeff McNeil had a big game because he also homered in the 9th inning, his 10th of the year to give the Mets their 8th run in the game. They get 11 hits, 4 home runs to go 3 for 9 with runners in scoring position. So a really good game for the Mets offense as well that has been swinging a really hot bat lately. The entire team started to figure it out with runners in scoring position. You're seeing Francisco Lindor, who just won the NL Player of the Week. He's red hot. Juan Soto remains hot. Brandon Nimmo's starting to turn the corner. Pete Alonso's had a good August. So this lineup is in a really good place. So even though they just lost a huge bat, which is what we're going to talk about next, and Francisco Alvarez, they have the pieces in place to keep the ball rolling without him, especially if you get some better contributions from Mark Vientos. Brett Beatty continues to be a steadying force, and Cedric Mullins still hasn't even had a hot streak yet. He has, hit some doubles. He's had some nice at-bats here and there, but largely he has struggled offensively. So you really look at a team that has so much firepower right now, and it definitely hurts to lose Alvarez, which we're going to talk about right now. But I think they're in a really good spot for the rest of the series, certainly, with Senga and Manaea about to go up against a bad Nationals lineup that they should have no problems with. And also, mind you, we talked about it going into the series. It was Jake Irvin, who's been really bad lately. The Mets continued that trend. You have Brad Lord, a rookie, and then you have Mackenzie Gore, has been even worse than Jake Irvin going in the final game. So this is a series the Mets need to take advantage of. They've gotten off on a good note when it comes to that, and I don't have any doubts that they'll be able to sustain that. But I do have plenty of concerns about Francisco Alvarez going down, so that's where we're going to go next. He has hit the injured list with a thumb sprain that will require surgery, but not necessarily immediately. So we'll talk about that here in just a minute. Today's episode is brought to you by GameTime. You ever decide at the last minute you want to head to the ballpark with your friends or family? Maybe it's game day and you suddenly realize you want to be in the stands. That's where GameTime comes in. It's the easiest way to grab last minute tickets without the stress. Maybe you want to just hop on a train, head over to DC and catch the rest of this series against the Nationals. You could do that with GameTime. They'll make buying tickets fast and simple, and the prices actually drop. The closer you get to first pitch, they've got incredible deals on last-minute seats, clear seat views, and a lowest price guarantee that takes the worry out of buying tickets. Plus, GameTime is the official ticketing partner of Locked On MLB, making it easy to browse the app for an exciting upcoming MLB game like Mets vs. Nationals this week, or maybe if we're in the Atlanta area, Mets vs. Braves, or maybe you want to see that awesome series next week, Mets vs. Phillies at home at Citi Field. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets with GameTime. Down the GameTime app, create an account. Use the code LOCKEDONMLB for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account. Redeem the code LOCKEDONMLB. That's LOCKEDONMLB for $20 off. Down the GameTime app today. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. If you're watching on YouTube today, do me a favor and hit that subscribe button. Help us get closer to our next goal of 15,000 subscribers. I'd love to get there by the end of the season, so I appreciate all of you who continue to subscribe. Also, make sure you check out our Locked On Mets postcast, which goes live after every Mets game. Chris Schubert does a great job with that show, so you can check that out on this channel. Now let's talk about the Alvarez injury. So it is a UCL sprain, not the same one that resulted in Tommy John. It's a ligament in the thumb that will require surgery. Carlos Mendoza let the media know that, but they are not saying season-ending injury for Francisco Alvarez, because essentially what this injury is right now it's one that will require a surgery to repair the ligament, but he can play through this. And it doesn't sound like it's an injury where this could be debilitating to play through it. It's just one of those things where it's a pain tolerance thing. If he can, play through it and can still be productive, it's not going to hurt him to delay this procedure until after the season. Once he does get the thumb repaired, you're looking at a couple of months where he's not going to be able to swing a baseball bat. And so if you do the surgery tomorrow, he's done. I mean, yeah, you can throw out there a distant possibility if you got the surgery done immediately and the Mets go on a deep playoff run. Sure, maybe at the very end of October, Alvarez is good to go, but that's just not realistic. You can't count on a deep playoff run, and I'd rather see 80% of Francisco Alvarez in September and early October than potentially 100% of Alvarez at the end of the season, which again is still not even a likely timetable. You're most likely looking at a season-ending injury if he does get the surgery. So for now, all they're going to do, let the inflammation come down for 10 to 14 days, reevaluate. If he's feeling good at that point, and Carlos Mendoza did say he's already feeling much better now that he's gotten some medication for that thumb, well then at that point, you can start to ramp him up a little bit. He's going to need a rehab assignment just to see, all right, can he play through it? I mean, that's you don't want to make the roster move to bring him up immediately without seeing him playing games. So it's going to be a test in his pain tolerance. If he's able to do it, all right, well, Francisco Alvarez still could come back in the middle of September and be there for the stretch run. If not, you're stuck with what you got right now, which is Hayden Sanger coming up to be the backup to Luis Torrens. So obviously that's not a good situation offensively, but at least it's a good defensive situation. I also want to note Carlos Mendoza made a point of mentioning the fact that this is a better injury for a catcher to have on his throwing hand, because if this was his glove hand and he's going to be, receiving 100 miles per hour all night long, then that repetition of just the pounding of his thumb, there'd be no chance. He'd have to get a surgery right now. He wouldn't be able to play with it. But because it's his throwing hand, you can keep it out of play a little bit, tape it up real good, and he can still throw the ball back to the pitcher. It's really going to be a test of, can he swing the bat, and can he swing the bat effectively with that thumb injury? But other guys have played through it, so the Mets are hopeful they'll still get him back. And honestly, considering the injury, the way that he jammed that thumb in the base, this probably is best case scenario, even though it's tough to say that when you're still talking about this guy needing his third hand surgery in the last couple of years, which is just brutal for him. But hopefully he'll learn something on this one, and they'll teach him how to slide into bases, and he will protect those hands as much as he can moving forward. Now, when it comes to the alternatives, it's going to be Luis Torrens. Now, I've seen some Mets ask about Kevin Parada getting the call up from Double-A. It is true that Kevin Parada has been swinging a better bat lately, had a brutal start to the season, had a very good month of June, hit 328, 977 OPS. July was a little more average, 752 OPS. He's been back up and hot again in August, 957 OPS. But Kevin Parada in Double-A this year has 9 home runs. It's not like he's tearing the cover off the baseball and brings you this great source of power. He has never faced even AAA pitching. And look, if you've listened to the show long enough, I've been out on Kevin Parada for years now. I've really been down on him as a prospect for a long time. And I always hope, if I'm down on a Mets player, that they make me look stupid. And maybe Parada does that. I just don't think it's going to be this year. His defense has never been very good. I haven't heard anything about him improving in that regard to the point that you would think he's on the same level of a Torrens or a Sanger. And ultimately, you've seen a lot of teams make deep runs without a bat at the catcher position, with guys that are just there for their defense. Martin Maldonado was the Astros catcher forever because they loved the way he handled their staff, not because of anything he did with the bat. Austin Hedges was on a Guardians team in the LCS last year because of his defense. So you see it all the time. Teams go without a good offensive catcher. Yes, Luis Torrens has a 584 OPS on the season. Been pretty brutal. But you know what? He doubled tonight, and he's a veteran. He'll give you better at-bats than Kevin Parada. I promise you that. It might not seem like it, but you look at Torrens, who only strikes out 22% of the time this year. I think there's a good chance Parada would come up and get exposed. Not to mention, it's not like he'd come up and play every day. He'd still be coming up to replace Sanger. And sure, you could say huge offensive upgrade over Hayden Sanger, but I think the defensive gulf is probably, even wider between these two guys. And the other thing I like about Sanger, we'll talk about in the next segment. I think Brandon Sproat's coming up next week. And so you have two pitchers in this rotation, in Nolan McLean and Brandon Sproat, who pitched to Hayden Sanger all year. So having Sanger up to handle their first big league starts, that's going to be a nice little advantage the Mets have, where I wouldn't be surprised at all if Torrens takes this whole series. There is a day game kind of after a night game, but it's a late afternoon. It's a 4:00 start, or maybe it's a 4:45 start, I think, on Thursday in DC. So I think he's fine to start all three of these games. And then on Friday, when Nolan McLean makes his next start in Atlanta, you could put Hayden Sanger out there. And again, we'll talk about Sproat more in the next segment, but I think he's going to start on Monday. You could have Sanger catch that game. And really, if you do roll with the 6-man rotation, that could be your split right there. You could have Sanger catching the two kids and Torrens catching everybody else. You got to lean defense with the catcher spot in particular. And there's just no world where we see Parada come up. I really don't think so. It'd be one thing if Alvy was done for the year, but they're not right now looking at this as a season-ending injury. So you have Torrens and Sanger, that tandem, hopefully getting you through the next couple weeks here, and then maybe Alvy can come back not too long after that. And also, I just think this lineup is starting to gel anyway, where having Torrens in the 8 hole with Mullins batting behind him to turn the lineup over, I don't think that's the worst thing in the world. You saw Vientos with another home run. I think he's starting to turn a corner, and this could be the ideal lineup for the New York Mets just because he gives you so much more in the power department than Starling Marte does, although Marte is still always that really solid fallback and a guy that's going to give you a veteran at bat and certainly one that can hit left-handed pitching. So Marte will have a role, but I want to see Vientos get a little more playing time at DH. I love it the Mets kept Brett Beatty at third base instead of moving him back to second base and trying to get Mauricio in there. Let Mauricio be the left-handed power bat off your bench. He's a really good pinch hitter. I think that's a fine role for him right now. You got to play Brett Beatty. In 23 games since the All-Star break, Beatty is hitting 282, 350 on base, 507 slug. It's an 857 OPS. He's got 5 home runs, 3 of them in his last 7 games. So he's been really swinging a good bat. If you just look at what Beatty has done since his demotion, which happened at the end of April and he came back early May, across 78 games, hitting 247, 308 on base, 434 slugging percentage. Those aren't outstanding numbers, but he's hit 12 home runs in those 78 games. He's got a 742 OPS, and I've talked about Beatty all year and compared him to Ryan McMahon, who's now the third baseman of the Yankees. And I just, having been trying to make that comp, because McMahon is a Gold Glove caliber third baseman. I think Brett Beatty can get there. Beatty is a really good defender now at the hot corner. If you have your third baseman hitting 20-plus home runs a year, playing great defense, and managing a 740 OPS, that's a fine starter in the big leagues. And right now, over 78 games, which is a large sample, that's exactly the guy Brett Beatty has been. You take those numbers, you extrapolate them out over a full year, you're talking about, again, a 742 OPS, 24 home runs, and 70 RBIs. That's a pretty good third baseman for the Mets. So I think he should hold down third, McNeil at second, obviously Mullins in center, Vientos and Marte splitting time at DH. And I'm sure against lefties, if you wanted to, you can still put Vientos at third, Marte at DH. Regardless, though, this team has enough firepower right now that they can get by with that Alvarez. Again, you have Lindor, who's red hot. Soto's got 6 home runs in his last 15 games played. Nimmo's on a 7-game hitting streak. Alonso's been great this month. Jeff McNeil just had the big game. So I feel like this team is really starting to turn a corner offensively at the right time. And even with all those guys in the starting lineup, to have Marte and Mauricio on the bench for every game or for most games, that's going to give you a right-handed option for pinch hitting opportunities and a good left-handed option. And you got TT, Tyrone Taylor for your defense and center when you need them and your pinch running. So I think this bench is good. This lineup's good. Yes, they are much better when they have Francisco Alvarez, but without him, I think they still have enough offensively. And Torrens is as good, if not better, than Alvarez defensively. So you're trying to get this rotation to stabilize. You want to see this bullpen start to really flourish. when you have Torrens and Sanger behind the dish, you're getting great pitch framing, you're getting strong arms, you're getting good game calling, and that helps your pitching staff. Remember, the Mets, when they had the best rotation in baseball, the best pitching in baseball, a lot of that work was done with the tandem of Torrens and Sanger. Not to say that, that the Mets got better. Francisco Alvarez was the Mets' best hitter over the last couple of weeks. This is still a big loss. I don't want to just, pump you with so much optimism that I think this is not a big deal. This sucks. Francisco Alvarez was playing the best baseball of his MLB career, and I thought he was going to be a huge difference maker for this team. Fortunately, he dives into a base on a hustle double, playing hard. You respect that, but it's just one of those things that should have been avoided. Unfortunately, it's not, and he's got to deal with this now. But I'll still bet on the kid to find his way back on the field this season if it's just about pain tolerance. And then we just have to see what it looks like. If it's compromising him, if he's all of a sudden timid behind the dish and not able to receive well as a catcher, and he's not swinging the bat well, eventually you might just decide, shut him down and have him get that surgery or just play Torrens more. But these are the cards the Mets have been dealt. And I don't think that this is something that should derail their season because they still have too much talent in that lineup. And the alternatives are not horrible. It'd be worse if you were telling me, Hayden Sanger is now your starting catcher because Alvarez is out. The Mets have one of the best backup catchers in baseball in Luis Torrens for a reason. And I think he'll be able to step up and do just fine. He might even swing a better bat than you expect. He hit a couple balls hard in this game. So I wouldn't even be too surprised if he rose to the occasion as well. And maybe had a good few weeks here as a cog in a better lineup, which is going to help every hitter anyway. So, Torrens struggling when the whole team was struggling, that could be a byproduct of everything going on around him. And sometimes, the rising tide, brings up all ships or whatever the expression is. Now, maybe that's the case for Torrens offensively, the way this lineup has started to swing it. So that's the latest on Alvarez, but I want to spend plenty of time in our final segment here talking about Brandon Sproat because I made a prediction on yesterday's show. I said if Brandon Sproat starts on Tuesday, he will make his MLB debut next week. And guess what? Brandon Sproat started in Syracuse on Tuesday. So I'll go through why I believe he's coming up and the impact he can have here in just a minute. If you're an everydayer that always tunes into the show, make sure you become a Locked On Mets insider. It's our texting service where you get updates from me. Anytime news breaks on the Mets, you can ask me questions anytime. Take part in our Locked On Mets sign photo giveaways and get a line graphic sent to your phone each day so you know who's in the starting lineup without ever having to go on social media. If you want to be a Locked On Mets insider, find the link in the episode description or go to subtext.com/LockedOnMets. Now, on yesterday's show, as I mentioned, I made the proclamation that if we saw Brandon Sproat start on Tuesday in Syracuse, he would be making his MLB debut the following Monday. Why did I make that prediction? Because David Stearns has himself a blueprint that he follows when he's promoting one of his top pitching prospects. And we saw that blueprint unfold last year when they promoted Christian Scott, who was at the time the Mets' top overall pitching prospect. Christian Scott was great to start the season in AAA. He had never pitched on 4 days rest. He made a start on 4 days rest for the first time. And then his next start came in the big leagues a couple weeks ago. I guess I don't even know if it was a couple weeks ago, but Nolan McLean made his first pro start on 4 days rest in AAA. Then he made his MLB debut in his next outing. Now, this does not mean that Brandon Sproat's going to start on 4 days rest moving forward. I think it's just something they like to do because he never known a big league rotation if you're going to have a guy make a start on regular rest. And so they want them to experience that one time in the minor leagues to know what it feels like. And then they give them their full normal rest as always, and they're good to go to make their MLB debut. So I really do believe we're going to see Brandon Sproat this week because the Mets are going to need a starting pitcher for that series against the Phillies at home, which begins on Monday. And the reason they need that is because Kodai Senga, it'd be his turn in the rotation. David Peterson can go on regular rest and pitch on Sunday, but Kodai Senga, he's not going to be good to go and pitch on Monday. That's just not going to happen. So you are looking at the road ahead. It just makes sense to plug Brandon Sproat in, who is in the conversation along with Nolan McLean to be the first one up. McLean obviously ended up being the choice, and rightfully so. He's had a better season. But Brandon Sproat's on a better stretch right now, where over his last 9 starts, including tonight, he is pitching to a 2.05 ERA with 57 strikeouts in 48 1/3 innings pitched. He has been dominant, and he had a great start tonight, which all but confirms my notion that he's going to come up, because if that was the task, it was to go out there, pitch on 4 days rest, and show you can do it and show that you're ready. He more than did that. He struck out the side in the first inning, gave up a 2-out triple in the second, but had struck out the first 2 batters before that, and then he had another strikeout to end that frame. So 6 strikeouts in the first 2 innings pitched. Third inning, he issues a leadoff walk, then a double, which scores a run. But he gets a strikeout, gets a few ground balls to escape further damage. Has a 1-2-3 fourth, 1-2-3 fifth with another strikeout. 6th inning, he works around a leadoff walk with that, or not leadoff walk, excuse me. The leadoff man reached on an error. He then stole second base, grabbed that, advanced the runner to third. There was then a comebacker, I guess, that Sproat was able to make a play at the plate, and then a flyout ends his day. Altogether, Brandon Sproat goes 6 innings, allows 2 hits, 1 walk, the 1 run, 8 strikeouts, only needed 83 pitches to get through those 6 innings with, again, 8 strikeouts. Completely pounded the zone, touched, I think it was like 99.7 miles per hour. I think he's ready to go. And going into the season, Brandon Sproat was the Mets' top pitching prospect, consensus. Everybody had Brandon Sproat as the number 1 prospect in this system. He throws the hardest of all these guys. So even though his stock has taken a hit and Nolan McLean and Jonah Tong are now, the prizes of this farm system, I actually did a poll sort of when I did my giveaway for the Locked On Mets Insiders, our texting service, gave away the signed photo this week. I always try to make it fun. And just to enter the giveaway, I had the insiders text their response for who's the next Met to win a Rookie of the Year. And I was expecting most people to say Nolan McLean, but just as much people said Jonah Tong. Jet Williams was not far behind, and Carson Bench actually led the polling. Brandon Sproat only got one of our insiders who texted that submission for him to be the next Rookie of the Year. So that shows you how much his stock has taken a hit amongst Mets fans and just the general perception. But I wouldn't be surprised if Brandon Sproat ends up being the best of all these guys. I'd put my money on McLean right now, especially after that first start we saw. And everyone loves Jonah Tong, and rightfully so. He's been the most dominant pitcher in minor league baseball this year. But don't forget what Brandon Sproat can do. So I'm really excited about this possibility. And I got a lot of people today because I sent some tweets out about this and got a lot of feedback from people on social media who were either agreeing with me or disagreeing. And one of the most common comments was, why not start him in Atlanta on Sunday and have David Peterson pitch? That way, it's once again, just like this series against the Nationals, your best 3 starters going up against Philly: David Peterson, Kodai Senga, and Sean Manaea. And in a certain respect, I understand that, but I would rather see David Peterson pitch on regular rest as opposed to Brandon Sproat pitching on regular rest again, because that would be the second time he's done it, and to do it back-to-back outings without getting that extra rest, I don't think that's setting him up for success. I also really don't think that this Phillies lineup is that much more scary than the Braves lineup offensively that you're actually going up against. If you're talking about the starting pitcher you might be facing, sure, but these lineups I don't think are too far off from each other, especially when the Braves are playing at home in what is a bandbox, particularly that chop house in right field. So I really think it's a softer landing spot for Sproat, even though it's a crazy intense series matchup, Mets Phillies in a division race. I understand that's a lot of pressure for the kid in his MLB debut, but it's at home. If it was in Philly, I'd have maybe a different opinion on it. But I'd rather see Sproat get the 5 days rest, go into that start, ready to go. And, if he's able to pitch with the home crowd behind him, you can get a very similar experience to what Nolan McLean got in his debut. So I think it makes the most sense for him to make that start on Monday. So the rest of this week, again, you got Senga, Manaea, McLean. Home should go on Saturday. David Peterson on regular rest on Sunday, which gives you the best chance to win that game. And you know what? every game counts. Yes, those games against the Phillies count a little bit more, but that game against the Braves counts as well. You win, you sweep this series, hopefully against the Nationals. You win that series against the Braves. You might get a incredible debut from Sproat, just like the one we saw from McLean, and that could give you another charge of momentum before you turn the ball over to what are supposed to be your best two pitchers in Senga and Manaea to finish off that series against the Phillies. The bottom line is this. If it's not Brandon Sproat, it's likely Frankie Montas. Likely with an opener as part of a bullpen game, but that's the alternative. There really is no other one. The Mets officially released Paul Blackburn today, so he's out of the picture. And there's nobody else. I mean, I guess the only other option would be calling up Brandon Waddell for a spot start, but I don't think you're going to go through the roster gymnastics for Brandon Waddell to make a spot start, and then you still would need another starting pitcher for Sunday because Kodai Senga, again, is not going to go on regular rest, and Noel McLean probably shouldn't be going on regular rest either. So this way, you have a 6-man rotation for this stretch where you're playing 16 games in 16 days, and if all goes well, you can keep that 6-man rotation if it's working, and in September, the rosters expand, so you can add another pitcher into the fold. And if it's not working for any of these guys, if Clay Holmes has a couple of bad starts and you want to move into the bullpen, you could do that. Keep the 2 kids in there with the off days that you have and the ability to go to bullpen games where Holmes can pitch and everything else. You'd have the ability to have a 5-man rotation of Peterson, Senga, Manaea, McLean, and Sproat, or it's a 6-man rotation with Holmes in it. And I guess the only thing that we've already talked about that's worth repeating here is just the fact that you're going to have to make a tough decision if you are going to bring up Sproat on your roster because, clearing a 40-man spot, that's easy. There's a bunch of guys that you could cut. You can just get rid of Justin Garza, for example, or Kevin Herget. It doesn't really matter. But when it comes to the active roster, there's only one guy you can option, and that's Reed Garrett. And if you don't think Reed Garrett deserves to be sent down, then you have to just bite the bullet and DFA Ryan Stanek. Now, my personal opinion is I would DFA Stanek because if you option Garrett, you're going to run into this roster crunch again in September because Tyler McGill is going to get healthy. So he's going to need to be added to the roster. And I don't think you're going to, park Garrett in AAA for the rest of the season. You still want Reed Garrett up. He's been a very effective reliever for you this year. And so I think ultimately, if you had to tell me who's had a better season, Stanek or Garrett, I think there's no question. So I would just remove Stanek from the equation. Simplifies everything. You have Sproat take Stanek's spot, clears the 40-man spot, clears the active roster. September, Tyler McGill gets healthy. He's your September call-up. And that's it. And then at that point, McGill could join that rotation too if you want to. All of a sudden, maybe you have Sproat and McLean pitching out of the bullpen, or if one of them gets optioned or shut down for the season, you always can bring up another arm like a Huascar Brazaban potentially to pitch in your bullpen in September, and then you see what it all looks like come October if you're fortunate enough to have a playoff spot. But I really think this is going to happen. I've been on this, for a little bit now that the Mets had to figure a way to get both of these guys up in McLean and Sproat. At one point, I was very critical of the Mets for getting rid of Paul Blackburn, but what I said at the time was my caveat is that if there was a plan in place to integrate the 2 kids into the rotation, then I'd be on board with it. And that's what this looks like to me. Because my only issue with getting rid of Blackburn was because it set up a scenario where Frankie Montas was going to have to pitch out of the rotation in big games at the end of August. Well, Sproat takes those starts. Fine by me. Hopefully Blackburn lands somewhere where he can pitch for the rest of the season and, reclaim some value for himself before he hits free agency. But as far as the Mets are concerned, a 6-man rotation of David Peterson, Kodai Senga, Shaw Manaea, Noel McLean, Clay Holmes, and Brandon Sproat is one I'm very excited to watch for the rest of this season if that ends up being how they do it. So now we just wait and see if that is the move they choose to make. In the meantime, we got a series the Mets here have in D.C. where they should be able to keep on winning. I'll be covering all of those games here on the show with your podcast each and every day. So make sure you follow, rate, and review wherever you get your podcast. Subscribe if you're watching on YouTube. If you want to be a Locked On Mets insider, find a link in the episode description. Go to subtext.com/LockedOnMets. Thank you for making Locked On Mets your first listen, your first watch every day. Now, for your second listen or second watch, check out Locked On MLB Game Night, the show that take you around all the action in Major League Baseball with insight from our local experts as well as league-wide experts who will take you through all the games. You can find Locked On MLB Game Night on the Locked On MLB YouTube channel as well as the Locked On MLB podcast feed.